And welcome back to Dear Jane. I am your host, Scott Baker. I'm joined today by my good friend, Marcy Little. She has been in the pro-life movement for about 11 years. She worked with Save the Stork. She's worked at a pregnancy center. So she has been in lots of different facets of the pro-life movement. Marcy, welcome today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, excited to finally have the perspective of a woman. That's probably helpful. So now we're finally going to have the right perspective. That's probably what a lot of people would be saying. So that'll be helpful. So excited to talk to our guest. Before we do it, today's episode brought to us by Choose Life Marketing. And your first responsibility, tell us all the wonderful things about Choose Life Marketing.
Choose Life Marketing is a full-service marketing agency run by people who are passionate about reaching her, the abortion-minded woman, and passionate about helping you reach abortion-minded women. If that is your mission, or if you are a pro-life organization seeking to impact a culture for life and to choose life, we would love to partner with you in that mission because that is our mission as well. As a full-service marketing agency, we're able to help you with every component of your marketing, from setting a marketing plan and setting goals to picking the right strategies and tactics for you to reach the people that you need to at the right time where they are. Our team of strategists and specialists would love to work with you. We also have a phenomenal fundraising team that has raised millions of dollars for pro-life organizations that would love to partner with you if that's a need of yours as well. So if your mission is to reach women, impact a culture to choose life, reach out to us. We'd love to partner with you in achieving that mission.
ChooseLifeMarketing.com's website. So make sure you check them out. Excited to talk today. All right, I've been rehearsing this, so here we go. Terrisa Bukovinac. How'd I do?
Great.
Great. Hey, Terrisa. Terrisa is you've probably heard her name before. She is the founder of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, and you may or may not know this, but Terrisa is also a candidate for president this year for the Democratic nomination. Terrisa, welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So, the candidacy for president for the Democrat Party, how's your campaign going?
Well, it's going great. The point of the campaign really is to run explicit ads of the abortion victims, the Justice for the 5 babies that I recovered from an all-term abortion clinic in 2022 from Washington, D.C. And we showed 12 ads in the Boston market and New Hampshire, because I was on the ballot in New Hampshire and I had an op-ed, and I performed better in the New Hampshire primary than half of the lesser known candidates, several who had a lot of financial backing and several who had actually done some ground campaigning there, which I did not. I really am trying to create this space for pro-life Democrats. But I really got more votes than I was expecting. So it's very exciting. We're working on getting on the ballot in New Jersey. And if I do, I will be able to run uncensored ads of abortion victims into Manhattan during the taping of some of the most high profile shows in America, like Saturday Night Live or The View. And I think that is going to have a further impact in getting justice, not just for these 5 babies that I recovered, but for the thousands like them that are targeted for late-term, third trimester abortion, elective abortion across the country.
Terrisa, can you tell us more about Justice for the 5? That's something I've been following, and I know it's a harrowing story, and unfortunately we know it's not isolated. You guys happen to be there in the right time and place, but can you tell us, and any listeners or viewers who may not know about Justice for the 5, kind of the background, what happened, what you and Lauren recovered, and where we are now with that?
Yes, thank you for asking. On March 25th, 2022, Lauren Handy and I, Lauren Handy is a very high-profile pro-life activist like myself, and she is right now serving a jail sentence. Well, she hasn't been sentenced, but she's been in jail since her conviction for totally nonviolent direct action at Sant'Angelo's clinic, the same clinic where we recovered the babies. But on this day, it was like almost 2 years past the date that she did the rescue. And as far as we knew, nothing was really going to happen from that rescue. But we had saved a baby at the Washington Surgery Center before by going into the waiting room with a rose And we encountered a mom there who was owed $4,000 in back rent and was facing eviction. And we connected her with this group called Let Them Live that helped pay her expenses to cancel her abortion appointment. And she walked out of the abortion center that day and kept her baby. And so on this particular day, we usually go to Planned Parenthood on Fridays and do traditional sidewalk counseling. But when we realized Planned Parenthood was unexpectedly closed, we decided, let's try to rescue a baby again at Sant'Angelo's clinic. So we went over to the clinic with Roses. But as soon as we got there, we saw a truck parked outside labeled Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services. And now we are experienced activists and we know what a medical waste service is likely doing outside an abortion center. But there is a lot of other types of medical businesses inside this same building. So we came around to the driver. We looked at the boxes. They had a Washington Surgery label on them. And I asked the driver, do you know what's in these boxes? Because he unexpectedly was out there on the sidewalk. There were 2 boxes on the dolly and one he had just loaded into the truck. And I said, do you know what's in these boxes? And he said, no. And I said, it's dead babies. And I was just speculating, of course, but making an assumption. And he was shocked. And he confirmed that they were from the Washington Surgery Center. And I said, would you get in trouble if we took one of these boxes? I was just thinking, like, just totally on my feet. Lauren and I hadn't even discussed it. And he said, well, what would you do with them if I gave it to you? And Lauren, she's Catholic, I'm an atheist. And she said, we'll give them a funeral and a burial. And so he said, okay. And we grabbed the box. We started to panic immediately. Some lady came up right behind us and was like, what did you let them take? And we're like, oh my gosh, we got to get out of here. We're shaking. The box was so heavy and it was like sloshing around. So we're like, what the heck is in this box? We immediately just call every person in the pro-life movement we've ever known who's handled fetal remains, who's ever dealt with any kind of like medical waste. We called our attorneys. We're like, just totally freaking out. What do you do? But we did come to the conclusion that we were going to need to open the box and figure out what was inside. And so we went to CVS. We got gloves, masks, and containers because we didn't know what we were going to pull out of the box. We thought, oh, it might just be like bloody gauze, or maybe we'll see like a pulverized arm or something. And we were like really bracing ourselves for something of that nature. But when we got back to our apartment, we had a Catholic deacon present. We had a photographer there, and we had a reporter come right after to photograph what we found. But Lauren cut open the box. Inside the box was a red biohazard bag. She cut open the bag, and inside was a mountain of these small turquoise containers, which she immediately recognized called Whirl Packs. And she said, it's babies. It's just babies. It's all babies. And so we're just frantically, but trying to carefully unpack each of these Whirl Packs onto the table. Each of them had a date on them and the initials of the parent. And as we started to unpack them, we're thinking, oh, there's a couple dozen in here, but it's getting more and more. And at the bottom, there was another bag with 5 much larger containers in it. And our hearts just sunk. And so the first container that we opened out of all of them was the largest one. And Lauren put her hands in the bucket with the gloves. And she said, this baby is whole. And she pulled out the most beautiful, whole baby boy I've ever seen. It was the most heartbreaking experience of our entire lives. Like, neither of us have ever seen something like this. And we regularly carry around a 22-week fetal model when doing activism. So we're familiar with the sizes of the babies at like their particular gestational ages. And this baby was like twice that size. And given that he wasn't dismembered, we were immediately concerned that this might look like a federal crime. Leaving a baby to die after they've been born alive during abortion is a federal crime. And so, it's like, what do you do at this point? Like, how do you move forward? We have to go through the rest of it. There's no turning back now. So the next bucket that we opened was a baby girl, same age, roughly. Her eye was wide open looking at us. And when we brought her out of the bucket, the back of her neck had been cut and where her brain had been suctioned out and her skull had been crushed, which is the hallmark of a partial birth abortion procedure, also a federal crime. Phoenix was also totally whole and encased in their amniotic sac, similar gestational age. So again, how did this baby die? Other than just being born alive and left to die in their own amniotic fluid. The other two of the larger babies were completely dismembered. I mean, horrifically ripped in half, spinal cord visible. Angel, his head had been decapitated and crushed. It was just an absolute horror show. I've been doing anti-abortion activism for 8 years. I've worked deep in the field of fetal organ harvesting and exposing these horrors, but seeing it up close, it was completely earth-shattering and life-changing for both Lauren and I.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How did that change your life?
Well, it changed my life significantly, but over the next few days, the FBI came and arrested Lauren for the rescue that she'd done at Santangelo's clinic 2 years before that. And then the police, which we had asked them to come pick up the babies, to at least the 5 largest ones we had, for your listeners who may be Catholic, there was a Catholic mass said for all of the babies, for unbaptized children, by a Catholic priest, and the other 110 were sent to be buried by a Catholic priest, because there were 115 babies total in this box. But the 5 largest ones, we asked the police to come and get them. And when the feds came and got Lauren, they just took her into custody on the sidewalk. But when I went back into the house, the police hadn't come for the babies yet. So I called the attorneys, what's going on? And then I had to go back and allow the police to enter. And so it's interesting because the narrative is that the DCPD they allegedly found these babies. And there's also reports that the feds raided Lauren's home. Both of those are completely false. We had to beg DCPD to come get these babies. They didn't want anything to do with it, really. So now Lauren's life has changed significantly since then, because she's been tried and convicted under the FACE Act, a law that's been totally weaponized against pro-lifers. It's been used hundreds of times against peaceful, nonviolent pro-life activists, and only twice against pro-abortion activists, which we know have been attacking pregnancy centers significantly since Roe versus Wade. But the Biden administration doesn't care about that. They only care about silencing pro-life speech. So Lauren's been in jail since August, awaiting sentencing in May, and she's facing 11 years in federal prison for physically putting her body in between that killer, Cesare Santangelo, that killed the Justice for the 5 babies, and other babies from 2 years prior. And for me, Roe was overturned just a couple months after. Both Lauren and I have been dealing with a significant amount of trauma from this experience. But it certainly was the major motivating factor in me deciding to run for president. I know I'm not going to be president. I know I'm not a sitting governor. I'm not a member of Congress, and I'm not a billionaire. I'm just a regular person who cares deeply about what happened to those babies and so many others like them. And the problem is that so many people like me, who are progressive, who are Democrats, who are secular, they do not believe that elective 3rd trimester abortions are a thing. And I am convicted and committed to making sure that they not only know that it's true, but that they see it with their own eyes. And when I found out that running as a federal candidate means that you can run ads totally uncensored by law, I knew that that was the path that I needed to take to try to get justice for these children.
Yeah, that's when on the debates that are going on with the states that are facing constitutional battles, our side says you're basically allowing abortion up until birth, and the other side says, well, that never happens anyway. And in Marcy, you're in Colorado, and there's a doctor out there that has. We know it happens. We
hear that all the time. Oh, partial birth abortion doesn't happen because it's a federal crime. Late term abortion doesn't happen, and I'm curious. I was thinking about that. Have you seen eyes opened as a result of this? How do you combat those lines of arguments that say, oh, well, it's banned federally, so it can't happen?
I think that the most important thing that the visibility of the 5 babies has done is to really show, especially the younger generation, what's happening, and so that they can mobilize for direct action. I believe when we're looking at the landscape of the abortion issue in America, it's clear that direct action got us to a certain place. We're the only country in the world, basically, that has a pro-life political party. And I believe that that is because of the social tension that was harnessed by Operation Rescue in the 80s and 90s. Thousands, tens of thousands were arrested. Peaceful, nonviolent, everyday Americans locked arms around abortion centers and said, no, you're not killing babies today. And that resulted in more than 75,000 arrests, more than any other peaceful social justice movement in the history of our nation. And that's why we have a pro-life movement. That's what needs to happen today. I think it's not just a matter of changing hearts and minds here and there, that we have to show them that this is really murder. This is really a genocide, and we are really going to act like it. We're going to put our bodies in between the killers and the baby. And I think in order to mobilize the next generation for this kind of commitment to activism, that showing the victims is absolutely critical. It's a critical element in any issue of social justice. And I think that for too long, the pro-life movement has shunned both direct action and victim imagery. And I'm determined to set the example for the next generation. I see it's already happening. My work was inspired really by David Daleiden and the Center for Medical Progress, and the gruesome realities that he exposed. And I see that that's true for a lot of people in my generation, but the younger generation, what has mobilized them is Justice for the Five. And I think it's going to continue to have a major impact on that generation, which is going to have an impact on the world.
All right, let's lighten things up just a little bit. What kind of a unicorn is a progressive pro-lifer? And boy, are you progressive. We're going to get into that here in a second. But I mean, you are a progressive pro-lifer. There aren't many of you that I've come across. I mean, how did that happen, and how do we get more of you?
Well, those are awesome questions. I personally did not become pro-life until I lost my faith. I used to be a meat-eating, pro-choice Christian. I believe babies went to heaven when they died, and that God was going to right all the wrongs in the end, and there's like all these horrible things happening in the world, but God, I'm not really getting involved in any of those issues. I'm just praying about it, and abortion seemed much more complicated, and so I just stayed pro-choice. It wasn't until I thought, oh my gosh, this is the only life we get, and like, we have this incredible opportunity to have this very rare conscious experience of the universe. Who has the right to take that from us, and why? And I couldn't square that away with being an atheist. Like, if this is the only life we get, then that is worth something. And if God's not going to fix it, I need to get out there and do something. I spent 14 years living in San Francisco, and which has had a big impact on my political views. Although I was always a leftist, from high school on. My family was very not political. So, like most young people, I formed a leftist ideology kind of early on, and reinforced by my life experience living in San Francisco. But when I'm looking at the problem of abortion in America, I see that the problem is clearly in the Democratic Party. It is my party. It is secular leftists like myself who are really allowing this to continue. And then if you dig into the stats, there's actually millions of secular pro-lifers out there. There's at least 12 million, according to Gallup and Pew polling. And something like 4 in 10 Democrats are pro-life. So you have actually this this idea, or this misunderstanding that there are no pro-life leftists, but in fact they're just being totally silenced by their party, because everyone in the world basically tells you, look, if you're pro-life, you're a Republican, you're a right-wing conservative. And I spent probably 10 years in silence on the issue. Even though I knew that I had an issue with abortion, I did not think that I was pro-life, because I'm not a religious conservative. It wasn't until I really saw there were other secular pro-lifers like Nat Hentoff and Christopher Hitchens, and realized secular pro-life was a thing, that I was able to start calling myself pro-life. And it's that representation that is such a big deal, that is literally keeping so many leftists silent on this issue. And breaking that toxic relationship between the Democratic Party and the abortion industry, to me, is the key to ending abortion in America. If you take away their power there, they have no power in this country, and it's going to affect them globally. And so if I can inspire enough leftists within the party to, instead of leaving, fighting them and saying, no, we're not going anywhere, you're going to change the party platform, then I think that we're going to see real results. So I am a leftist authentically. That is who I am. But I'm also using it strategically to try to draw out the people that I believe can really end this.
What are some of the differences you see? So, facing resistance within your own party, but even like, so I'm a Republican, I'm conservative, but I look around at my party and I think, where are all the pro-life people? Like there seem like there are more of them here, but they're not engaged and activated either. Do you find that they're on both sides and in both parties they're inactive for the same reason, or do you think it's different reasons? What's your interaction, I guess, been within both parties?
That's an interesting question. I definitely think on the right, people are reluctant to do direct action because they believe because people on the right like to view themselves as more modest or more law abiding or more polite and things like that. And I think it kind of disrupts that view they have of themselves. But the reality is that there is not a social justice movement on the planet that has ever been successful through nonviolent means that didn't have to face arrests, that didn't have to make people hate them, that didn't have to show victim imagery that outraged people. And I think just in general, most people are afraid of doing those things. And I understand that. I mean, I have certainly paid a huge price, and Lauren is paying a much bigger price for what we've done. And, I think that we'll continue to pay. But we have to draw out the people who are social justice minded, who are willing to take those bigger risks. And I think the more people that do that, the more people that set the example and show this is what being pro-life is about. It is about being willing to give up some of the comforts of life, the comforts of people just liking you and not thinking you're a bad person, and just going into it knowing that you're making the world a better place and that this is the only way.
All right, let's lightning round or word association. What's that game? I forget what it's called. All right, ready?
Oh no, I'm nervous. Yeah.
Quick response. My body, my choice, Terrisa.
There is no quick response to that, because bodily rights issues are very complicated. And if we're not willing to acknowledge that, if we just want like some quick response, we're not going to reach the other side. We're not going to help them to understand that we really do care about bodily rights, and there's a lot of nuance amongst pro-lifers about what that means. I think when I'm in a position of trying to mobilize all kinds of people who might oppose abortion, like Democrats who maybe just oppose third trimester abortion and things like that. And so there are different bodily rights issues at stake in different stages of pregnancy and under different circumstances. And I think acknowledging that is first and foremost really important. But I think overall, we in general do not have the right to directly kill someone who is perhaps violating our bodily rights. I mean, like I said, it's really complicated, and I'm sorry I don't have a quick answer for you, and I wish I did. And if someone comes up with one, I'd be more than happy to hear it. But I think that is actually the strongest argument from the other side. And if we are just looking for a quick response, I think that's not going to be helpful to us.
All right. As a crazy pro-lifer, Terrisa, you're against women's health care.
Killing is not healthcare, and the entire pro-life movement acknowledges, for the most part, that if a woman's life is in jeopardy, truly, that is a different circumstance morally. That's not what we're opposing. We're opposing elective abortion, and that is not healthcare.
That's pretty good. I like that one. Mm-hmm. Now, I mentioned earlier that you are very progressive. You suggest that if one of the biggest answers to eliminating the abortion problem is eliminating capitalism. Please help me understand.
Well, this is actually a really valuable talking point when talking to leftists, because a lot of leftists recognize that that maybe not all leftists want to eliminate capitalism, but recognize the problems of capitalism. And socialism on the left, seeks to try to limit some of the problems that we see from capitalism. But I think that the main thing that people recognize is that there is just this intense there is like a what's the word there is an incentive to exploit people, and that the abortion industry thrives on exploitation. It's exploiting people in their most vulnerable circumstances for profit, for their own personal profit. And they're using that profit to buy politicians and to buy the media, and all of that is a product of the fact that there are no safeguards in this situation in terms of their capitalistic greed.
What do you think, Marcy?
It's interesting because I see all of the preying on women and the greed that's associated with it. I always tell people are always like shocked when I say it's about money. That's what this ultimately is about. And that sounds so crude and awful to say, but that's what it boils down to is the abortion industry makes so much money off of vulnerable women who don't understand their other options. I don't know. I was thinking about non-capitalist countries that have forced or heavily encouraged abortion. So I'm curious how that plays out. I think whether it's companies operating within a capitalist society or governments operating in a more socialist society, there's still going to be an issue here with abortion because I think at the root of it is money and power, probably. So it's an interesting concept to think about. I'm curious, like how you see, because I know you do a lot of work with Monica Snyder. We've had her on before, and she's spoken at one of our events, and we love all that she's doing in her talks about bridge building between, the various branches of the pro-life movement. What are some effective ways you see of building bridges between the more progressive side and the more conservative side, especially because those sides don't always, they don't work together very well on a lot of issues. So is there a way for us to link arms?
Yes, there totally is. And that is a big part of my activism. I think that's kind of where pro-life leftists have dropped the ball in the past. I think it's just traditionally been very difficult for them to work alongside conservatives and kind of try to create this separate movement, and that is not helpful to us. So if you study social justice movements and the history of them, that is the one thing that is just going to tank your movement. You have to be unified. And the pro-life movement post-Roe was almost entirely leftist. So there is a deep history of leftists, and rescue in particular was basically invented by pro-life leftists and then later co-opted by conservatives during the Operation Rescue years. But we absolutely have to work together, and that's one of the main things that I'm trying to demonstrate to the younger generation, that they have to be able to work side by side, that they have to. I get so much crap from people like, how can you call yourself progressive and then you'll work with Ted Cruz? It's like, we have to work together. We have to find our allies wherever they are, and we have to put aside the other issues if we're going to be successful. But I did want to say that Monica and I actually go way back from before we were involved in the pro-life movement. I hired her at Starbucks when I was a store manager back in 2008. That's how we met. And it wasn't until years later that I saw her posting on the page Secular Pro-Life that I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a secular pro-lifer. That's me. And then we reconnected at the Walk for Life in San Francisco, and the rest is history. But we really go way back.
Does every secular progressive have to work at Starbucks at some point in time?
Yes, that's the rule. That is a hard and fast rule.
I thought that might be a thing. So, any chance you get to speak at the Democrat convention this year?
Well, in 2020, I put together a pro-life caucus. They did not formally acknowledge us, and it was COVID, so we had to do it right outside in the gazebo. But we did get some press off of that. But absolutely, they're not going to let me speak. I mean, they're going to do whatever they can to bury my story and what I'm doing and justice for the five. And I'm just such a thorn in the establishment side. And I'm hoping to become an even bigger one as time goes by. But I am going to continue to keep pressing on the DNC to change their platform. I mean, the reality is you had a platform some years ago that acknowledged that they would respect the variety of views on the issue within the party, but then changed it, I think, in 2012 or maybe 2008 to reflect abortion basically for any reason, and that it should be totally accessible without any barriers and at any point in pregnancy. And so they are this close, like they are just barely in that zone of just total extremism. And I think that there is a real chance that if I get enough people to protest them and make a scene, and especially if the Gen Z comes up behind them and is like, how can you call yourselves progressive and anti-fascist and anti-capitalist if you're supporting the abortion industry? I think there's a real good chance we could roll back some of that extremism. And that would be a huge win for the movement.
Are there any pro-life Democrats on the federal level? I'm trying to think.
Not really. None that I'm really excited about. I mean, I think Joe Manchin has voted pro-life in some cases, but he also kind of flirts with the abortion industry once in a while, and he's not really a leftist in the way that you would normally perceive a leftist, and kind of same with Cuellar. And I think that right now we don't have, pro-life Democrats do not have any institutional power. We have none. It's been stripped from us.
Oh, no.
And that's what I'm trying to rebuild. Like my campaign, like I said, it's not a winning campaign, but we've laid really important groundwork in New Hampshire, which is a really important place in this nation in terms of the elections and indicating where the American people stand. So I think that the fact that I performed somewhat well in that is a layer of brick in this house that we're trying to build that is going to ultimately make a difference. And we can't just be like, well, it's not going to happen right now, so it's not worth doing. But we really have to invest step by step in changing the Democratic Party, because that's when abortion's going to end.
I don't know, Marcy. Do you buy the 4 in 10 Democrats? I don't.
I don't see it unless it's truly that it's silent. Like I even know within the Republican Party there are a lot of silent pro-life people that in my experience get stirred up when you talk about taxpayer funding of abortion, but they may not get stirred up about other things. So I don't know. I also live in a pretty progressive liberal state, and we do have a Democrats for Life group here, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's not. It's even. It's not. It's almost like. I mean, I just think of Joe Biden, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
he used to be
Yeah.
pro-life once upon a time.
Yeah.
And he's
But he wants to-
he's been forced to do a complete 180 to where now he is aggressively pro-abortion. And you have to do that to have any kind of success in the Democrat Party.
well, to get money from the abortion industry and to have a future in the DNC, but it doesn't
Right.
represent most Democrats. Still, even to this day, this is Gallup and Pew polling. This isn't like pro-life polling or something. But it's complicated, obviously. Like the way people describe pro-life and pro-choice, we know that that's convoluted, and some people might say they're pro-life, but they're like okay with abortion in the first trimester. But the point is that enough Democrats still somewhat identify with that label. And we know that something like 70 something percent of Democrats, according to Gallup and Pew polling, oppose elective abortion past viability. And that's definitely happening, but they just don't think that it is. And so there is some sentiment in the party that's significant, and it is being silenced, because how you are totally stigmatized and shamed if you even suggest that like a ban at viability would be a good idea, even though most Democrats actually totally agree with that, like by far. So
I
that's
think
the
the issue
situation.
is most people don't believe that it's happening. That's what
Yeah,
we saw in exit polling in Ohio. They
that's what they're
said that
told.
they said the pro-life side ran these sensationalist ads about things that never happen. And
Right.
it's like they do happen. We tried to
Yeah.
pass a 22-week ban on abortion in
Yeah.
Colorado
Yeah.
in 2020, and people just said that doesn't happen. Why is this needed? And
Yeah.
so I think
Prop
there's a big
115.
education gap and opportunity there to really demonstrate this is happening. And it's not just happening in isolated incidents and clinics in DC, it's happening all over the country.
Well, we need rescues at Hearn's Boulder Clinic. If you get enough
Yeah.
rescues out there, and I think that somebody might get a hold of, a box of fetal remains and expose him.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Teresa, let's make a deal. If you make it to the stage at the Democrat convention, give one of these ear tugs, so I know you're saying hi to us here at the Dear Jane podcast.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And, of course, in the name of being fair, we have to give equal time to the other presidential candidates. So if Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I don't know if he could talk for 30 minutes straight, but, all the other ones, we have to be fair. So, Teresa, so your website, let's make sure we plug the website. It's TERRISA, Teresa2024.com. And the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising is PAAUnow.org. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Dear Jane.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got a new episode every week. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to tell your friends about us either. Our producer is Kate Yule. Our editor is Jacob McCormick. For Marcy Little, I'm Scott Baker. Thanks for listening to Dear Jane.